She was sent to apologize for her sister's cruel lie. Just a quiet, plain spinster knocking on a stranger's door, expecting to be sent away in shame. What she didn't know, the man on the other side was the coldest, richest duke in England, and he hadn't proposed to anyone in his life until her. The post-chaise rattled to a stop on the gravel drive, and for a long moment, Lady Honoria Whitford did not move. Through the small window, Blackwood Manor rose against the grey Derbyshire sky like something carved out of a mountain. Pale limestone, sharp angles, rows of tall windows that caught no light. Even the ivy along its walls seemed afraid to climb too high. She pressed her gloved hand flat against her stomach to steady it. 20 minutes, my lady, the coachman called down from his box. Then I must water the horses. 20 minutes to beg a man not to ruin her family. Honoria stepped out into the cold air. Her wool pelisse, a soft grey thing that had been her mother's before it was hers, looked thin and travel-worn against the polished stone of the entrance steps. Her straw bonnet was modest. Her gloves had been mended at one seam. She had nothing about her that belonged in such a place, and that was rather the point. She had not come here to impress anyone. She had come to apologize. A butler with hair the color of frost opened the great oak door before she could lift the knocker. "Lady Honoria Whitford," she said quietly. "His Grace is expecting me." "His Grace is in the small saloon. This way, if you please." She followed him through halls that smelled of beeswax and old smoke, past portraits of long-dead Blackwoods who all seemed to be frowning at her in particular. Her slippers, sensible and worn, made almost no sound on the marble. With every step, she lifted her chin a little higher. If she was to face the most powerful man in 3 counties, she would not arrive trembling. The small saloon was not small. It was the size of her father's entire parlor at home, with a fire that roared in the grate as though it had been fed something living. Arthur, Duke of Blackwood, stood by the window with his back to her. He was taller than she had expected. Black coat, dark breeches, hair the color of pitch tied with a ribbon at his nape. When he turned, his face was perfectly composed, and his eyes were perfectly cold. "Lady Honoria." His voice was low and very even. "Sit, if you wish. I shall not be long with you." She sat. He did not. "I have been informed," he said, "that your sister has spent the past fortnight telling every drawing room in Derbyshire that I compromised her at the Marsden Assembly. I was, at that moment, 200 miles north, dining with my steward. I have the journals of 3 men to prove it, including a magistrate. So you will perhaps understand, my lady, why I am not in a forgiving humor." "Yes, Your Grace." "Your father's debts to my estate," he went on, "amount to nearly £11,000. I had intended to be patient with him. After this matter, I no longer feel patient. He will receive a writ from my solicitors before the week is out. There will be no roof over your family by Michaelmas." He said it the way a man might remark upon the weather. Honoria felt every drop of blood leave her face. She also felt, quite suddenly, very tired of being afraid. "Your Grace," she said, "I have not come to beg." He lifted one dark eyebrow. "I have come to apologize. What my sister did was monstrous. She lied to force a proposal, and when that failed, she lied louder to save her pride. I cannot defend her. I shall not try. Whatever you choose to do to my family, you have every right to do." How refreshing! "However," she added, and reached into her reticule. He waited. She drew out a folded letter. The seal had been broken. It was the demand letter from his clerk, the one that had arrived at her father's door 8 days ago and put her mother in bed with a sick headache for 3 of them. "This came from your man of business," she said. "The total is wrong." A small, sharp silence. "I beg your pardon?" "The total is wrong, Your Grace. He has added the interest from Lady Day twice, once as a separate line and once folded into the principal. The true sum owed is £10,432, not £11,090, a difference of £658. She placed the letter on the small table between them. I do not say this to lessen the debt. I say it because if you intend to ruin us, Your Grace, I should rather you do it for the correct amount. For the first time since she had entered the room, Arthur, Duke of Blackwood, looked at her. Truly looked. His eyes moved over her face the way a man might examine a chess piece he had mistaken for a pawn. There was no warmth in it. There was something else, something quieter and far more attentive, the way the air feels just before a storm breaks over the moors. He picked up the letter. He read it. His jaw tightened just once. "Sit down, Lady Honoria," he said, though she was already sitting. He took the chair opposite her, and the cold thing in his eyes had been replaced by something rather more dangerous. Interest. "You will stay to dinner," he said, "and you will not leave Blackwood in the morning until I have spoken with you again. Your Grace, my coachman will be paid, generously, by me." He set the letter down with great care, smoothing one corner flat with his thumb. "Now, tell me, my lady, how exactly did you come to read a clerk's ledger?" And Honoria, who had spent her whole life being told that clever girls did not get husbands, smiled for the first time in 8 days. She did not sleep. The bedchamber the housekeeper had given her was twice the size of her own at home, with a 4-poster bed hung in deep blue silk and a fire that someone had built up while she dressed for dinner. The sheets smelled of lavender. The pillows were soft as river stones worn smooth. None of it mattered. Honoria lay on her back and watched the firelight move across the plastered ceiling and counted in her head the things her family would lose by Michaelmas. The house at Whitford Cross, her mother's pianoforte, her father's library, which he never read but loved to stand inside of. Her younger brother Tobias would have to leave Harrow. Lyra would not have a season at all and would blame Honoria for it until the end of her days. At 5:30 she gave up entirely, rose, and dressed herself without ringing for the maid. The same grey wool pelisse, the same mended gloves. She had brought nothing else of weight. A footman she had not seen the night before was waiting in the corridor. "His Grace requests you in the library, my lady, when you are ready." She had thought she would be ready. She found, walking the long hall behind him, that her hands were shaking inside her gloves. The library smelled the way she had always imagined a proper library should smell. Beeswax and old vellum and wood smoke, and, faintly, the leather of bindings that had been handled by 3 generations of Blackwoods. Oak shelves climbed all 4 walls to a ceiling painted with stars. A great desk sat in the center, and at it stood the Duke. He was not in his black coat this morning. He wore a deep green one, and no cravat, only a loose linen shirt beneath, as though he had been at work for hours and had stopped caring how he looked. There were ink stains on his right hand. "Lady Honoria," he gestured to the chair opposite. "Thank you for coming." She sat. He did not move from behind the desk. "I shall be direct with you," he said. "I have not slept either." She had not said she had not slept. She did not bother to deny it. "Last night, after you went up, I sent for my steward's copy of the household ledger, the one your sister's letter was drawn from. I checked every line. You were right. He has done it 3 other times this quarter, on 3 other tenants, and I had not noticed any of it." His mouth tightened. "I employ him on a salary of 200 a year. He has cost me, by my reckoning, somewhere near 900 this 12-month alone." "I am sorry, Your Grace." "You needn't be. I am not telling you to apologize. I am telling you because I want you to understand the position I find myself in." He came around the desk then, and sat in the chair beside hers, not opposite. It changed the air in the room. She had expected an interview. She was being offered a conversation. "My father died 11 months ago," he said. "He left me 4 estates, a townhouse in Mayfair, a hunting box in Leicestershire, and the most catastrophic set of account books I have ever had the misfortune to open. The northern lands have been bleeding money since before I came of age. I have tenants who have not been visited by a Blackwood man in 9 years. I have a steward in Northumberland who I now strongly suspect of theft, and a clerk in this very house who cannot add. I am 36, Lady Honoria. I have spent the last year drowning." She said nothing. There was nothing to say. "And every drawing room in London," he went on more quietly, "is full of mothers who have decided that I am a prize to be won by whichever of their daughters can faint most decoratively in my presence. Your sister was the 3rd this season alone. The other 2 had the grace to do it in private." Honoria felt her cheeks warm. "Your Grace, I am not finished." He looked at her directly. The cold from yesterday was still there, but it was no longer aimed at her. It was the look of a man who had made a decision and was now obliged to speak it aloud. "I have a proposition. It will sound mad. I ask only that you hear the whole of it before you answer." "Very well." He took a folded paper from inside his coat and laid it on the small table between them. It was thick, expensive, and already sealed at the bottom in red wax. "Marriage, by special license, within the fortnight." She did not breathe. "You become Duchess of Blackwood. You take charge of my ledgers, my correspondence with the stewards, the running of the household books. In return, the £11,000 your father owes me is forgiven entirely. Your family receives an allowance of £1,200 a year for as long as you and I both live. Your brother stays at Harrow. Your sister has her season, though not at my expense in any way she will enjoy. Your mother keeps her pianoforte." Honoria found her voice somewhere near the back of her throat. "And what do you receive, Your Grace?" "A wife who will not faint at me, a mind I can trust with my affairs, and a great deal of peace from London mothers." "That is all?" "That is all I require. I shall not ask anything further of you. The marriage need only exist on paper and in public. In private, you will have your own apartments, your own time, your own person." He paused. "I am not a man who would take what was not offered. You should know that before you sign." The fire shifted in the grate. A log fell. She thought of debtor's prison. She thought of Tobias at Harrow, dirty-kneed and laughing. She thought of her own hands on a ledger that mattered. "Give me the pen, Your Grace." He did. The traveling chariot was the finest carriage Honoria had ever sat inside. Deep green leather on the seats, soft enough that a body sank into it as into a feather bed. Silver lamps mounted at each corner, a small folding table that could be drawn out across one's lap for letters or for dining, 2 matched bays in the traces, and a coachman in dark Blackwood livery on the box. They had left Derbyshire on the Tuesday morning with 2 outriders, a maid called Peggy, who barely spoke above a whisper, and a great deal of luggage that did not belong to Honoria. The Duke sat opposite her. He had been reading the same page of a treatise on drainage for half an hour. "You are not turning the page, Your Grace." He looked up. "I beg your pardon?" "You have been on page 47 since Buxton. Either the drainage of Lincolnshire is more arresting than I had supposed, or you are not reading at all." A small muscle moved at the corner of his mouth. It was not quite a smile, but it was the first thing close to one she had seen from him. "I am thinking," he said, and closed the book. "About? About how a woman who has been a wife for 4 days and who has every reason to be furious with me has so far behaved as though we were old acquaintances on a pleasant outing. Would you prefer me furious, Your Grace?" "I should prefer," he said carefully, "that you call me Arthur, when there is no one to hear it. You are my wife. The word grace every quarter hour begins to feel absurd." She considered him. "Arthur, then, in private." "Thank you." They stopped that night at the Swan at Newark, a coaching inn of red brick with a yard full of postboys shouting at one another and the smell of roasted mutton drifting from every window. The Duke had taken 3 rooms, one for himself, one for her, one for the maid. He had been very precise about it with the innkeeper, and Honoria had pretended not to notice the way the woman's eyebrows had risen. They dined together in a private parlour above stairs. Cold beef, pickled walnuts, bread still warm from the oven, and a jug of small ale that Honoria found she liked rather more than the claret. "Tell me about the northern estates," she said, halfway through the meal. He set down his knife. "You truly want to know?" "I am to manage them, yes." So he told her. He told her about Ravensmere, the great holding above the Tyne, where the home farm had not turned a profit in 7 years. He told her about the tenants at Coldhope, who paid in kind because the cash rents had been raised past what the land could bear. He told her about a bridge at Linton that had collapsed in the spring floods of 2002 and never been rebuilt, so that an entire village now walked 4 miles further to reach market. She listened. She asked questions. She asked about the soil at Ravensmere and whether anyone had tried turnips in rotation with the barley. She asked the price of a stone of wool at the Hexham market. She asked how many souls lived at Coldhope. By the time the candles had burned down to stubs, Arthur was leaning forward across the table, with his sleeves pushed back to the elbow, drawing a rough map of the Tyne Valley on the back of a tavern bill with a stub of pencil. "You have a remarkable memory for figures," he said when at last he sat back. "I had a remarkable governess. She was the only one my father could afford after the bad year. She taught me Latin and arithmetic instead of dancing, on the theory that one of them would feed me." "And the dancing?" "My mother taught me to dance herself. Very badly." He laughed. It was a short, surprised sound, as though it had escaped him without permission. She thought, watching him, that she had not seen him do that before, either, and that it was a thing worth noting. They rose with the dawn on Wednesday and again on Thursday. By the 3rd afternoon, the green country had begun to flatten, and the road grew thick with traffic. Drovers with sheep, a mail coach overtaking them in a roar of dust and horn blasts, a farmer with a cart of early apples, a regiment of foot soldiers marching south in red coats, the sergeant calling cadence, and Arthur lifted his hat as they passed. Somewhere south of Stamford the carriage hit a rut and the folding table slid. Honoria put out a hand to catch the inkwell. Arthur put out a hand to catch hers. For one long breath their fingers were together on the polished wood, his ungloved, hers in soft kid, and neither of them moved. He drew his hand back first. "Forgive me." "There is nothing to forgive, Your Grace." "Arthur. Arthur." She turned to the window. Outside, a hedgerow was thick with rose hips. She watched them go by and did not trust herself to look at him for some minutes. He spoke first. When he spoke. "My mother was very kind," he said quietly, as though continuing a conversation they had not yet begun. "She died when I was 9. My father was not a kind man. I tell you this so that you understand. I did not learn how to live in a house with a woman in it. You may find me cold. I do not mean to be." Honoria turned back from the window. "You are not cold, Arthur. You are tired. There is a difference." He looked at her for a long moment, and something in his face that had been locked tight since Derbyshire eased, just a little, and let go. "Yes," he said. "I suppose there is." The Mayfair townhouse stood on Grosvenor Street, 4 stories of pale stone with black railings and a brass knocker shaped like a lion's head. Honoria stepped down from the carriage on the Friday evening, with London's coal smoke catching at her throat and the lamps already lit along the street, and she thought, quite plainly, "I do not belong here." Then she walked up the steps anyway, because she was a duchess now, and duchesses did not stand on pavements. The house inside was a different world from Blackwood Manor. Where Derbyshire had been dark oak and stone, here all was light and silk. The drawing room on the first floor had walls of pale rose hung with watered silk that shimmered when the candles were lit. A pianoforte stood near the window. The ceiling had been painted with garlands by some Italian hand long dead. Honoria, who had been raised in a parsonage-sized manor with mended curtains, stood in the middle of the carpet and tried not to gape. "It was my mother's room," Arthur said quietly behind her. "I have not changed a thing in it since she died. You may. Anything you wish." "I would not dream of changing it." He gave her the smallest of nods, and she understood, without being told, that she had said the right thing. Her family arrived on the Sunday. She had written to them from Newark, a careful letter explaining everything, sealed with shaking fingers. The Duke's first allowance had reached Whitford Cross before her letter had. They came south in a hired chaise paid for from that purse, and they came with luggage, as though they had been invited to stay a month. Her mother wept the moment she saw the entrance hall. "Oh, my dearest girl, what have you done? What have you given up?" "I have given up nothing, Mamma. Come, the housekeeper will show you to your rooms." Her father pumped Arthur's hand with a vigor that suggested he had practiced the gesture in the carriage. Tobias, 11 years old and freckled, looked up at the painted ceiling and said, "I say, this is jolly," and was hushed by his mother. Lyra came in last. She was, as Honoria remembered her, only more so. Golden hair dressed in the latest style, with a single ringlet over one shoulder. A traveling gown of cherry-colored merino that must have cost a great deal of someone's money. Blue eyes that took in the rose silk, the pianoforte, the painted garlands, the size of the hall, and the brass-buttoned footman who was carrying up her trunk. And they took it all in without warmth. "Sister," she said, and offered her cheek. Honoria kissed it. Lyra's skin was cold. They dined together that evening, the 7 of them, in the small dining room. Arthur was a careful host. He asked Tobias about Harrow. He listened to Honoria's father describe at length a scheme for raising pheasants. He gave Lyra the polite half-attention a man gives to a young lady he is determined not to encourage, and Honoria, watching from her end of the table, saw her sister mark every degree of it. After the meal, her mother and father went up early, exhausted from the road. Tobias was sent to bed. Arthur excused himself to write to his steward. Honoria found herself alone in the Rose drawing room with Lyra. Her sister Rose walked to the pianoforte, struck a single sour note with one finger, and turned. "How clever you are, Honoria." "I beg your pardon?" "How very clever. To go in my place, to sit and weep prettily, no doubt, to play the wronged sister." She smiled. It did not reach her eyes. "And to walk out a duchess. I had not thought you had it in you. Truly, I had not." "Lyra, I told a lie, I admit it. I told a stupid girl's lie because I wanted him, and he had not even looked at me, and I was angry. And for that lie I was to be punished, and Papa was to be ruined, and Mamma was to go into a decline, and it was all to be my fault, was it not?" Her voice did not rise. It grew quieter. Quieter was worse. "And then my plain elder sister, who has not had an offer in 26 years, goes to apologize, and comes back with a coronet. Tell me, Honoria, how did you manage it? What did you say to him? What did you do?" Honoria set down her teacup. She did it with great care, because if her hand had shaken, the porcelain would have rung against the saucer. "I corrected an error in his clerk's arithmetic," she said. "That is what I did." "Liar!" "Lower your voice, Lyra. There are servants." "Let them hear. Let them all hear. You stole him from me." "I stole nothing. He was never yours. He was never going to be yours. You told a lie to trap a man who was 200 miles from you, and when he proved it, you let our father walk to the edge of ruin rather than admit it." Honoria stood. She was the taller of them, though only by a little, and she had never once in her life used that fact until this moment. "I came here to save us, all of us, including you. And I shall continue to save us. But you will not speak to me in that manner again under this roof. Not once." Lyra's mouth opened, closed, opened. "You think you are grand now, do you?" "No," said Honoria. "I think I am tired. Good night, Lyra." She walked from the room without looking back. In the hall, she found that her hands were trembling after all. She pressed them flat against the cool wallpaper and breathed until they stopped. From the floor above, very quietly, she heard her sister begin to cry. Honoria did not go to her. The vouchers had arrived on Tuesday morning, slipped under the front door of the Mayfair house in a cream envelope sealed with the cipher of Lady Jersey. Honoria had stared at them across the breakfast table.
"They have admitted me, then." "They have admitted the Duchess of Blackwood," Arthur said without looking up from his paper. "Whether they have admitted you remains to be discovered on Wednesday evening." She had laughed before she could stop herself. He had glanced up, surprised, and the corner of his mouth had done that small thing it did when he was pleased and did not wish to say so. By Wednesday evening, Honoria was less inclined to laugh. She stood in front of the long pier glass in her dressing room while Peggy worked the last pins into her hair. The gown was ivory silk, high-waisted, with a narrow band of seed pearls beneath the bust and a short train that whispered when she moved. Long gloves of white kid reached past her elbows. Her mother's pearls, which her mother had insisted on sending up by Tobias, lay cold against her collarbone. On her left hand, the Blackwood ring caught the candlelight, a great square sapphire set in old gold. She did not recognize the woman in the glass. "You look very fine, Your Grace," Peggy whispered, who was 18 years old and from a village outside Macclesfield, and had never been further south than Derby until a fortnight ago. "Truly, very fine." "Thank you, Peggy." Arthur was waiting in the hall. He wore the strict evening black of an English gentleman, white cravat tied in the manner that had taken his valet half an hour, and 3 ruined lengths of muslin. Swallowtail coat, knee breeches, white silk stockings, a single pearl pin in his cravat. He looked at her once when she came down the stairs, and then he looked at her again, longer, and forgot for a moment to offer his arm. "Will I do?" she asked. "You will do," he said, and his voice was a degree lower than usual. "You will more than do." The carriage took them the short distance to King Street. The square frontage of Almack's was unremarkable from outside, a plain set of rooms above shops, and Honoria had heard 100 times that this was rather the point. Inside, the great ballroom was lit by 1,000 candles. The walls were hung with pale silk. A small orchestra played a country dance at the far end, and the floor was full of young ladies in white and gentlemen in black, turning and bowing and turning again. The whispers began the moment she was announced. "Her Grace the Duchess of Blackwood." The dancers did not stop. They never did, but every head not actively engaged turned a fraction of an inch, and the murmur that ran round the room was the sound of 100 fans being lifted at once. "That is the elder sister, the one who... They say she... Surely not. Look at her. Look at the gown. She is plain as a Sunday loaf, and yet there she is." Honoria kept her chin level. Arthur's gloved hand was steady under her elbow. "Breathe," he murmured. "I am breathing. Breathe deeper." She did. Lady Jersey came to greet them first, which was a kindness and also a strategy, since whatever Lady Jersey did, the room would follow. She was small and dark and sharp-eyed, and she looked at Honoria the way a jeweler looks at a stone he has not yet decided whether to buy. "Duchess, welcome." "My lady, I am much obliged for the vouchers." "We shall see whether you remain obliged by the end of the evening." A small smile. "Lady Catherine wishes to speak with you. I should warn you." Lady Catherine Pelham was the patroness most feared at Almack's, an iron-haired woman of 60 who had outlived 2 husbands and a parliamentary career and had never forgiven her own niece for marrying a man of trade. She moved across the ballroom with the inevitability of a frigate under sail. "Duchess of Blackwood, a new face. How charming." "Lady Catherine."
I was just remarking to Lady Sefton that one hears such interesting things about your family of late. Her voice carried beautifully. The nearest cluster of matrons stopped pretending not to listen. I hope you find London agreeable. You are from Derbyshire, I think. One forgets sometimes how little of the world one sees from Derbyshire. Tell me, have you ever crossed the Channel? I have not, my lady. No, I thought not. A pity. Such a broadening thing, travel. I was speaking only this morning to a gentleman just returned from Lyon. He was describing the most delightful route through the Auvergne. Are you familiar with the Auvergne, Duchess? With the volcanic country? The Prix de Sancy, perhaps? Arthur shifted at her elbow. He was about to speak. Honoria pressed her gloved fingers lightly against his sleeve. No. The Puy de Sancy, she said, in the same pleasant tone Lady Catherine had used, is the highest peak of the Massif Central, my lady. 6,188 feet, if I recall correctly. It lies south of Clermont-Ferrand, in the department the French now call Puy-de-Dôme. I have read a great deal about the Auvergne, since my husband has tenants who emigrated there during the late Troubles, and from whom we still receive occasional correspondence. I should be delighted to compare notes with your acquaintance, if he should care to call. A small, dreadful silence. Lady Catherine's mouth opened, closed. How edifying, she said at last. You are too kind, my lady. Lady Jersey, behind her fan, was smiling. Arthur did not speak as he led Honoria onto the floor for the next set, but his hand, when it closed over hers, was warm through the kid of his glove, and he held her fingers a fraction longer than the dance required. She rather thought she might survive London after all. The morning room at Grosvenor Street faced east, which Honoria had decided within a week of arrival was the only civilized aspect of London. The sun came in clean across the rooftops at 8:30. The tea was hot, and for 1 hour each morning, Arthur put aside his correspondence and she put aside her ledgers, and they read the papers together as though they were any ordinary married couple in any ordinary house. It had become her favorite hour of the day. She had not told him so. That Friday morning she was reading the Times, and he had the Morning Post. A plate of buttered toast sat between them, and Peggy had brought in a fresh pot of tea not 5 minutes before. Honoria was halfway through a column on grain prices in East Anglia when Arthur went very still across the table. She looked up. He was holding the Post with both hands. He was not breathing. "Arthur?" He did not answer. "Arthur, what is it?" He folded the paper once, then again. Then he laid it down on the cloth between them, with the printed side facing her, and his finger came down on the column without a word. It was the gossip page. She had learned to skim it in the mornings without letting her eye catch. This morning, her eye caught. We are reliably informed that the new Duchess of B, lately of Derbyshire, secured her present elevation by means rather less romantic than the world has been led to believe. A correspondent of unimpeachable connection informs us that the lady in question came to her husband's notice not through the natural channels of acquaintance, but by means of a certain family paper of considerable antiquity, the contents of which his Grace would not wish to see set in type. The reader may draw his own conclusion as to which party in this arrangement should be congratulated. We understand the lady's younger sister, a beauty of the first rank, has been left to console herself with a much reduced expectation. The room was very quiet. She read it again, then a third time, because the words seemed to rearrange themselves each time her eye crossed them. A family paper of considerable antiquity. There was no such paper. There had never been such a paper. She had not so much as crossed the threshold of his bookroom at Blackwood without him present. "Arthur?" He did not look at her. He was looking at the silver toast rack as though he had never seen one before in his life. "Arthur, I did not—" "Do not. I beg your pardon. Do not say it." His voice was perfectly level. It was the voice he had used to her on the first morning in Derbyshire,
the cold, even voice, and she had not heard it from him since Newark. "Do not stand there and tell me you did not. I have not asked you. I shall ask you when I am ready to ask you." "Then ask me now." "No." He rose from the table. He did not look at her as he did it. He walked to the window and stood with his back to the room, his hands clasped behind him so tightly that she could see the white of his knuckles through the linen of his shirt. Honoria sat very still. She understood, with a clarity that was almost a physical thing, that this was the hinge. That whatever she did in the next 5 minutes would determine the next 40 years. She understood also that to weep, to plead, to swear on her mother's life and her brother's and her own would be exactly what a guilty woman would do, and that he would believe none of it. So she did not weep. She rose. She walked, without hurry, from the morning room up the great stair and along the corridor to her own apartments. She unlocked the small writing desk by the window. From the lowest drawer, she drew out the bundle of correspondence she had carried with her from Derbyshire. Every letter she had written or received since the day she had set foot in Blackwood Manor, tied with a length of brown tape exactly as she had been taught to file by her father's old curate when she was 12 years old. She carried the bundle back down to the morning room. He had not moved from the window. She laid the bundle on the breakfast table beside the folded paper. She untied the tape. She spread the letters out, one beside another, in the order they had been written, each one dated in her own hand in the upper right corner. "There are 63 letters here, Arthur. Every letter I have written since the day I met you, and every reply I have received. They are in order, they are dated. They include 3 letters to my sister, 4 to my mother, 11 to my father concerning the home farm at Whitford Cross, and 29 to your stewards on the northern estates. They include the 4 letters I have written to Lyra since we came to London, in which I have not so much as mentioned your name except to wish her well in her season. Read them. Read every one. Take as long as you require. I shall be in the library." She walked to the door. "Honoria." She stopped. She did not turn. "Why are you not weeping?" "Because if I weep, you will think me guilty, and I am not guilty. Read the letters, Arthur." She closed the door behind her. He read them. All 63. It took him until past noon, and the tea grew cold, and the toast went uneaten, and at 12 minutes past 1 o'clock, he walked into the library and found her at his great desk, with a ledger open and her pen steady, and he knelt beside her chair and laid his forehead against the back of her hand and did not say anything at all. She set down the pen. "Lyra," she said quietly. "Yes," he said. "Lyra." Brighton in late August was a different country. The salt wind came off the channel and rattled the awnings along the Stein. The sea was the color of pewter under a low sky, and the gulls cried over the bathing machines from dawn until dusk. The Prince Regent's pavilion rose at the heart of the town like a confection a child had imagined, all white domes and minarets and crescent moons of stone, and Honoria, who had grown up looking at the honest grey churches of Derbyshire, thought it was the most ridiculous building she had ever seen, and could not stop staring at it. The gala had been arranged for the Wednesday evening. Half the peerage of England had come down for it. The road from London had been so thick with carriages on the Tuesday that Arthur's coachman had taken them by Lewis to avoid the press. They were staying at a house on the Marine Parade that Arthur had taken for the fortnight, 3 stories of white stucco with a balcony that overlooked the sea, and Honoria stood on that balcony on the Wednesday afternoon and watched the tide go out, and tried not to think about her sister. The investigation had not been difficult. Arthur had hired a man, a quiet sort of man, the kind who wore a brown coat and asked questions in tap rooms and was paid in sealed envelopes. By the Monday evening, they had known everything. The paragraph in the Morning Post had been placed by an under-clerk at the paper who had been paid 2 guineas in coin. The coin had been brought to him by a footman in livery that did not belong to any London household. The footman had been engaged by a lady's maid. The lady's maid was in the service of a Mrs. Beresford, lately of Bath,
a distant aunt of Honoria's mother who had not been to the family in 20 years and had recently developed a sudden and tender interest in her great-niece, Lyra. Lyra had written to her in July. Arthur had not shown Honoria the letter. He had told her only that there was one and that he had it in his possession, and that he had also obtained the bank draft by which Mrs. Beresford had paid for the slander. Honoria had not asked to see either. There are some things one does not need to see to know. She had asked one thing only. "She will be at the pavilion?" "She will be at the pavilion. Mrs. Beresford has secured an invitation through a cousin of her late husband's. Lyra is to be presented to the regent." "Then we shall be there also." "Honoria, we shall be there, Arthur. I shall not have my sister come into a public room and discover she is unmasked by a stranger. I will do it myself, quietly, once, and then it will be done." He had looked at her for a long moment, and then he had nodded. The pavilion that evening was a fever dream of candlelight, gilt and crimson everywhere, pillars painted to look like palm trees, a great chandelier shaped like a lotus. The orchestra played from a gallery hidden behind fretwork. Honoria wore pale blue silk with silver thread and the blackwood sapphires at her throat, and she walked into the long gallery on Arthur's arm and felt the eyes turn and let them. She saw Lyra at the far end of the room within 2 minutes. Her sister wore white and gold, and a wreath of small gold leaves in her hair, and she was laughing at something Mrs. Beresford had said, a high, bright laugh that carried over the music. She had not yet seen Honoria. "The card room," Honoria said quietly. "There is a small gallery off the card room that gives onto the gardens. Will you ask her to me there?" "I shall ask her." "And you will stand with me?" "I shall stand with you." He brought her in 7 minutes. Lyra came into the small gallery with a curiosity in her eyes that turned, when she saw who was waiting, into something else. Mrs. Beresford was not with her. Arthur had been particular about that. "Sister," Lyra said. The word had a small chip in it. "Lyra?" The candles in the wall sconces guttered in the draught from the open garden door. Honoria took from her reticule a folded paper. She did not unfold it. "I have a copy of the letter you wrote to Mrs. Beresford on the 11th of July. I have a copy of the bank draft by which she paid the Morning Post. I have the name of the clerk who took the money, and the name of the footman who carried it, and the name of the maid who hired the footman. I have signed statements from all 3. I have given the originals to my husband's solicitor in Lincoln's Inn. The copies I keep in the small safe in my dressing room at Grosvenor Street, of which only I have the key." Lyra's face had gone the color of the wall. "You will not speak to me again," Honoria said quietly. "You will not write to me. You will not write to Arthur. You will not speak of either of us in any drawing room in England. You will finish your season under Mamma's eye, and you will accept the first respectable offer that is made to you, and you will live a quiet life in the country, and you will be grateful for it. If you do not, the papers go to the magistrates and you go before a judge for criminal libel. You will not survive the trial, Lyra, neither in law nor in the world. Do you understand me?" Lyra's mouth worked. "And the allowance to Mamma and Papa," Honoria added, "continues. Whatever you do, they are not to be punished for your sake. That is my gift to you, the only one you will ever have from me again." Lyra turned. Lyra walked out of the gallery without a word, and the candles steadied in the sconces behind her, and Arthur let out a breath Honoria had not known he was holding. "It is done," he said. "It is done." September turned to October, and October to the first hard frosts of November, and Honoria found that she had not thought of London in a fortnight. Blackwood Manor in autumn was a different house from the limestone fortress she had first seen in April. The beechwood that climbed the hill behind it had gone the color of beaten copper. The home farm below the long meadow was bringing in the last of the apples, and the smell of crushed fruit and wood smoke hung over the village from morning till dusk. The rooks came back to the elms by the south lodge each evening at 4 o'clock in a great, quarrelsome cloud, and Honoria had taken to walking out to meet them whenever the weather would allow. She had taken the small book room off the east wing for her own. It had been a sewing room in the late Duchess's time, and before that, Arthur had told her, a music room. It had a tall window that faced the rising sun and a small fire that the maids kept going from October to April. 3 new shelves had been put in along one wall. On those shelves now stood 32 ledgers, bound in dark green calf, each one with its date and estate name stamped in gold on the spine. She had done them all herself. Ravensmere, Cold Hope, the Tyne Valley Holdings, the Mayfair House, the Leicestershire Hunting Box, the home farm at Blackwood, the Derbyshire tenants, the smaller properties at Linton and Glanton, and the 4 cottages at Hexham that Arthur had not even remembered owning until she had found them in a folded sheaf at the bottom of his father's old strong-box. She had written to most of them, not all. The Northumbrian estates she had visited only by post and by careful interrogation of the new steward, a quiet Yorkshireman named Mr. Pelling, whom she had hired in September after the old one had been turned off without a character. But the southern holdings she knew now with her own eyes. She knew the names of the head tenants. She knew which of the cottages had a leaking thatch and which had a wife in her last weeks of confinement. She knew that the bridge at Linton had been rebuilt by Michaelmas, under and £3 over budget, and that an old woman called Mary Hetherington had wept when the first cart had gone across it, and had sent Honoria a basket of damson preserves by way of thanks. The figure she was writing, on the cold, bright morning of the 3rd of November, was a 4. It completed the sum at the foot of the consolidated ledger. Net annual income, after all repairs, after the new drains at Coldhope, after the wages of 2 new stewards and the rebuilding of the bridge and the cancellation of 17 unjust arrears, and the writing off of 3 bad debts that ought never to have been on the books at all. £6,412, 6 shillings, and a 4-penny piece. The estate had not turned a profit in 9 years. She blotted the figure carefully. She closed the ledger. She sat for a long moment with her hands flat on the green calf binding and looked out at the beech wood with the morning light coming through it, and she found that her eyes were wet, and she did not quite know why. That was when she heard him at the door. "May I come in?" "You may always come in. It is your house." "It is your room." He stepped inside. He had been riding. There was a leaf in his hair and the cold of the outside air on his coat, and he stood at the threshold of her small book-room as though he were uncertain of his welcome there, which he had not done for some time. He carried a folded paper in his hand. "You have finished," he said, looking at the ledger. "I have finished." 6,000? 6,412, and 6 and 4. He laughed. It was the short, surprised sound she had heard from him at the inn at Newark, and she had heard it perhaps 100 times since, but it caught her every time, and this time she found she had to look down at her hands. He came across the room. He laid the folded paper on the desk beside the ledger. "What is this?" "Read it." She unfolded it. It was the marriage contract. It was the contract he had drawn up in the library at Blackwood on the 2nd morning, the one she had signed with his pen and his great onyx seal, the one that made her duchess and forgave her father's debt and bound her to the running of his estates for as long as they both should live. She knew it well. She had a copy of it in her own desk in Mayfair. This copy had been struck through. A great diagonal line in black ink ran across the face of it from corner to corner, and beneath that, someone, Arthur, had written in his careful, upright hand the word "cancelled," and beneath that he had signed his name and the date and put his seal. Honoria stared at it. She did not speak. "You are free," he said quietly. "Your father's debts are gone. The settlement on your family stands and shall stand as long as I live, and after, by the terms of my will. You owe me nothing. Not your time, not your presence, not your name if you do not wish it. There are lawyers in London who can dissolve the marriage on grounds of mutual consent, quietly, without scandal. I have written to one. He waits only on your word." "Arthur!" "I shall not stop you, Honoria. Whatever you choose, I shall not stop you."
He turned before she could speak again and walked out of the room and closed the door behind him. She sat alone with the cancelled contract in her hands for a very long time. She did not sleep that night either. It seemed to Honoria, lying in the great blue-hung bed at Blackwood Manor with the cancelled contract folded on the table beside her, that all the important nights of her life had been spent without sleep. The night before she had come here in April, the night before she had signed the contract, the night before Almack's, the night Lyra's paragraph had appeared in the Morning Post, and now this one, the night that was supposed to be the end of all of them, and was somehow worse than any. She rose before the maids had been in to lay her fire. She dressed herself in the grey wool pelisse, the same one she had worn that first morning, mended at the seam where it had given way in October, but still her own. She put on her stoutest boots and her warmest gloves, and she went down through the sleeping house and out through the side door by the kitchen garden, and the cold of the morning hit her cheeks like a wash of clean water. The mist lay along the low ground in a soft grey blanket. The beechwood above the house had lost most of its leaves now, and the rooks were already up, calling to one another in the bare elms. She walked along the stone terrace that ran the length of the south front. She did not know how long she walked, perhaps 20 minutes, perhaps an hour. She walked the length of the terrace and back again, and her hands grew cold even inside the gloves, and somewhere in the kitchen yard a boy was drawing water and the bucket handle squeaked at every turn of the rope, and Honoria walked and thought about a small green book room with 32 ledgers on its shelves, and she thought about the way Arthur had laughed when she had given him the figure, and she thought about a hand under hers on a polished traveling table outside Stamford, and she thought about a man kneeling beside her chair in his own library without a word. She heard his footsteps on the gravel before she saw him. He came round the corner of the south wing with his greatcoat thrown on over yesterday's shirt and his hair uncombed, and he stopped when he saw her, as though he had not expected to find her there, as though he had expected to find her gone. Honoria. Arthur. He came no closer. He stood at the foot of the terrace steps with one hand on the stone balustrade, and she stood at the top with her own hand on the other side of it, and there was a yard of cold air between them. "You are still here," he said. "I am still here." "I know what you thought." She came down the steps, slowly, one and one and one, until they were at the same height, and she could see the small lines at the corner of his eyes that had not been there in April, and the place under his jaw where he had not shaved yet that morning. "Arthur, why did you tear up the contract?" "I have told you why." "You have told me what you did. You have not told me why." He looked away from her. He looked across the lawn to the beechwood, and the muscle in his jaw worked once, and he did not speak for a long moment. "Because I could not bear it any longer," he said at last. "I could not bear to look at you across a table and know that you sat there because I had bought you. I could not bear that you laughed with me and rode out with me and balanced my ledgers for me because £11,000 and a writ in Chancery had made you do it. I could not bear that the best thing in my life had been purchased. I would rather have nothing of you at all than have you on those terms. That is why." "Arthur, let me finish. If you stay, Honoria, I cannot have it be because the contract bound you. I cannot have it be because your family is fed by my purse. It must be because you wish to stay. Or it must not be at all. There is no third thing." The wind moved in the bare elms. She set her hand on the stone of the balustrade beside his, not quite touching. "You are a great fool, Arthur." He went very still. "I beg your pardon?" "You are a great fool. I told you I considered this house my home a fortnight ago. I told you over the Coldhope Ledger when you asked whether I missed Derbyshire, and I said that I was already in it. I told you I had no wish to go back to Whitford Cross when Mamma wrote in October to ask whether I should winter with her. I told you, when you came in to bid me good night on the night we returned from Brighton, that you were the best thing that had ever come to me. I have been telling you, Arthur, since the inn at Newark. You have only not been listening." His eyes had not left her face.
I do not stay because of the contract. I have not stayed because of the contract since the 2nd week of June. I stay because I love you, you great fool. I stay because there is nowhere else in England I have any wish to be. I stay because you laugh as though you have forgotten how, and I should like to be the one who reminds you. There, now you have it." He did not speak. He drew her hand off the balustrade and into both of his own, and he bent his head over it, and after a moment she felt his shoulders shake, only once, and she put her free hand against his hair and held him there. The mist lifted from the low ground. The bell in the village rang for 7 o'clock. They walked back to the manor together, and Arthur did not let go of her hand until they were inside the door.